Here's a great idea for your next outing. A cruise of the L.A. Harbor on a Spirit Cruises yacht. Spirit Cruises offers everything you need to relax and enjoy your time on the water. For more information, call 310-548-8080 or visit spiritmarine.com.
Hello there, Thrashpie here with yet another edition in this continuing podcast saga about the historic pure rock format born and launched at a 1,000-watt FM station in Southern California, KNAC. I'm going to attempt to give you a better idea of what it takes to be a successful radio station in Southern California from scratch. Very important to note, from scratch. Notice I'm not referring to our home as L.A. or Hollywood. We had to relate to California, and specifically Southern California, not so much L.A., and certainly not Hollywood. You try to pull off being a Hollywood celebrity in this town, you're going to lose your street cred. That's just how it's going to work. If you don't believe me, remember what happened to pirate radio. You start showing up courtside floor seats at Showtime Lakers games, putting your face on billboards next to Angeline. You're no longer representing the little guy in your audience, and that's just a fact. They learned that the hard way. The only time my face was ever used in a station advertisement was on the side of a bus. Orange County, California, not exactly glamorous there. We were waging an uphill battle, and not just at the start. We were fighting the big stations all throughout our history, and we not only survived, but succeeded despite the negatives, which were many. I'll go over a couple. -1. We had a puny 1,000-watt FM signal. You could only hear us in Orange County, parts of L.A., and in fact, our tower at first was in Signal Hill, right outside of Long Beach, and it was moved up to Dominguez Hills, a little closer to L.A., which gave us a little bit better reach, but not much. Interestingly enough, there would be weird little pockets of reception, nothing in the valley, and sometimes spotty along the Palisades, and believe it or not, out east. This is music director Ross Goza.
That audience, they were everywhere. But it was interesting to see which communities adopted KNAC first and grew. Like, we had a huge following out in Hemet, and because they could move the cars up on top of the hill and pick up the signal at night. And it became the place where everybody in the school out there, that's where they went. They went up and listened to KNAC up on the hill as it came in, and whoever had the biggest car stereo with the best antenna was the one that would open the doors and crank it up for everybody. And they had big keg parties up there.
It was a social network.
It was, indeed.
-2. We were located in Long Beach. That's an hour coming south on the 405 from quote-unquote town. The record companies were all on the west side, or Hollywood, and the rest of them were out in the valley. I can only imagine promotion director Tom Marr asking a record label rep to bring a band down for an interview and hearing the silence on the other end of the phone. That was at first. Things began to change. Sales manager Nikki Randolph told me that we started getting lucky. Some of the big-time metal legends got on board with us early and made the trip to the station in person.
I remembered our very first guest was Ozzy Osbourne. I remember one morning Alice Cooper was there, and I was very excited to meet him. And I said, wow, you got up so early and put makeup on. And he put his face right next to mine and said, this isn't makeup.
Now, those are big-time guys. Their appearances on our air gave us cred with our audience and, moreover, motivated other artists to come down to the station. So, after all, neither KMET nor KLOS ever mentioned any of those guys, and let alone play their records. So artists like Ozzy, Iron Maiden, and of course Metallica became KNAC's bread and butter. Now this is where the whole idea of personal relationships comes into play. Most good business people will tell you, at the foundation of any good business relationship is a good personal relationship. And so it was with KNAC. Ross Goza, our music director, got his marching orders from program director Jimmy Christopher. Get out there, meet the people in the industry, and get them to know us. And the hand of friendship was extended not only to the superstars,
And that goes back to how it started with, Jimmy encouraging me to meet all these people. When you become friends with a manager. Remember Warren Entner, who managed Black and Blue? We probably played more Black and Blue than anybody else in the country.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of it was because of Warren and how our relationship with him, And it's not that he was giving us stuff. It's just he was a real guy. The band were nice guys, and he'd bring them for anything. You'd do a remote somewhere, and, he'd show up with the lead singer and make an appearance somewhere down in South Orange County or something.
The hard work was paying off. Our audience became true believers in KNAC, and in a way, we were the 1980s version of Facebook, the Metalheads Facebook. Fans of hard rock, metal, our pure rock format went with us to events, clubs, concerts, you name it. We had a strong local show for unsigned bands, and it was hosted and produced by Craig Williams. Great show. Craig gave a hand and radio exposure to some great bands, Poison in the early days, Warrant. Craig also got the demo for Guns N' Roses, too, just before Appetite for Destruction broke big. Bands knew where to come for support from KNAC listeners.
Don't forget Bon Jovi. Slippery When Wet hadn't become the giant, Bon Jovi was still a rock band, and we were behind them early. That video shoot at Long Beach Arena, we needed a crowd, and they came to us. And that's why the Slippery When Wet, that all those kids had KNAC T-shirts in the front row, and
they did.
KNAC sticker stuck on the stage, and all those shots ended up in the final video.
I remember doing station promotions similar to that Bon Jovi video shoot. I emceed a quote-unquote staged concert. It was being filmed as part of a movie. It had Kirk Cameron as the star, a quite forgettable movie. I can't even remember the name. But at any rate, the band was autographed. Now, not one of our big bands, mind you, but nevertheless one of our bands. And our KNAC audience filled the Long Beach Arena for that shoot as well. And then there were those events where we had to jump on board or we'd get left behind. One such show was essentially a live rehearsal by Metallica at an old Orange County club called Jezebel's that burnt down due to an electrical problem some years later. Wink, wink. It was one of Jason Newsted's first appearances with Metallica as bass player and was following the unfortunate death of Cliff Burton earlier that year. Again, KNAC listeners packed the place to overflowing. Metallica was to become perhaps our greatest friend, the greatest friend to our radio station ever. They were there at the beginning, and they were there at the very end. Again, personal relationships at the foundation of business relationships. Music director Ross Goza on Metallica.
They were friends of the station in a way that I don't know that there was another band that was as tight with a station as they were. Kirk and I used to play guitar up in his hotel room at the Sunset Marquee after the show. We were both born at the same hospital in San Francisco the same year, and so we became friends. And so we were jamming one night, and I was showing him some Robin Trower stuff. He had learned from Joe Satriani, so he came from more of the progressive classical style scales, and I was the thumb over the top blues guy. So we used to have a lot of fun, and I remember they recorded a version of, what was it? They did a Trower song on one of those at the end of a recording. I remember he sent me he told Lon, he goes, "Hey, tell Ross to listen to something. We did a Trower for him." And I was like, wow.
Wow is right. I remember being blown away at just how many musicians and record guys knew KNAC. I answered the hotline phone one morning during my show, probably a little after 6 in the morning, and his voice says, "Hey, is Ton there?" Of course, he was talking about the pure rock queen, the leather nun, Ton Mastery. And I go, "Well, it's a little early for Ton. She'll be in this afternoon." And he says, "Well, tell her I called, will you?" And I'm thinking, okay. And I said, "Well, sure. Who's this?" "Oh, this is Ronnie Montrose." So see what I mean about personal relationships?
Ton was great. She was a pro's pro, and, she could come in feeling terrible. And as soon as the light went on for the on-air booth and she'd get on the air, she was Ton. She was a pro.
Yeah.
And she was great. She knew how to flirt with all the rock guys that came in. The relationship on air between her and David Coverdale was priceless.
Oh, my God. That was one of the very biggest things that we did early on when I was there. That was 86, 7. And that Whitesnake record,
Yep.
Oh my God, that was huge. And here, I turn on the radio in the afternoon. I'm at home. I turn on the radio and I think, oh, what's Tawn doing? She's just kind of yakking at some guy, and he's got a British accent. And oh my God, that's David Coverdale, and he brought her his record. He brought the station, but it was Tawn that I'm sure talked him into it.
On her show.
And that was a gigantic record. Oh my God.
Yeah, huge.
Can you imagine being the program director at an ABC-owned radio station in the same town as little bitty us and hearing something like that go down?
Oh.
And you go to your staff and your music director, you say, what the hell's going on here? We're getting our ass kicked by 1,000 water in Long Beach.
They did, too. They turned around and they called Geffen. All those guys up there at Geffen all took heat over that one. But they were willing to do it. They were supporters and friends. That goes back to the personal relationship thing.
Now, I have to say that what we heard from Ross in this podcast triggers my memory of that time at KNAC. I had never experienced an excitement like that at any other radio station that I ever had spent time at, and there were 13 of those altogether. And that includes 2 other L.A. radio stations as well. I think of the time at KNAC, that programming department had a power 3, Jimmy Christopher, Tom Marr, and Ross Goza. Jimmy giving direction. He was a very experienced radio guy. Tommy Marr had been booking bands at Long Beach State and doing promotion there. He designed our promotions, set up the interviews. And Ross came in as an intern, a music fanatic. He picked the best records for us and acted as foot soldier. He went out and made the actual real bonding relationships happen for KNAC with artists, artist management, concert promoters, club owners, record labels, and record producers. And these personal relationships were at the very foundation of any success we had. Air staff's worth mentioning, of course. Me, Tawn, Paul, Gonzo, Dangerous Darren, goodness gracious, Animal Anna Lee, Razor, everybody. We were the public voice that was mostly extended to our audience. Now, this behind-the-scenes work is the key to winning in a competitive radio market like Los Angeles. Well, it seems to me a great shame that there's no place in radio these days for some good old street-level promotion, some guerrilla marketing. And when it comes to, radio, working with the music industry and working with music industry people, Ross hits the nail on the head.
My theory about all that was you have to stay visible. Those people have a million stations to think about and a million things on their plate. And if we're going to get any kind of shot at anything, you just got to be there in front of them all the time, as often as you can, so that when an opportunity arises, they will think of you when they're going to make a decision about an act which may or may not help the station.
It's that street hustle style promotion that made KNAC what it was. And that hustle and those personal relationships enabled KNAC to become known with our audience and gain attention of the music industry, the radio industry, both California, the United States, and around the world, as we'll see in future episodes. Well, thanks for hanging with me during this slight diversion into Radio 101, old school style. I'll get back into more of the KNAC story, the history, next time and in future podcasts. There's more drama to come in the programming department. There's big-time anniversary celebrations to talk about, and a reality show-style ego blow-up from yours truly. So stay in contact. My email is thrashpieradio@gmail.com. Keep an eye on Facebook. And feel free to share with your friends there, and I'll talk to you on the next Thrashpie Radio Podcast.